All right, through everyday living, we all make decisions each and every day. Everybody agree with that? I mean, we have decisions to make. Sometimes the decisions are easy decisions, sometimes they're very difficult, sometimes they're hard to deal with. But I wanted to look back this morning at some of the decisions that was made in the Bible by some of the people, some of the characters that are, they're not characters, but they're people that in the very beginning, they actually made some tough decisions. And they based those decisions upon godliness. And so that's what I want to talk about this morning. So let's start with Hebrews chapter 11. That's where we're going to go this morning. Hebrews chapter 11. We'll be talking about a man named Abel. You all remember who Cain and Abel was. We remember they were the very first two that we have record of as far as children. And so whenever we look at this, I want you to think about a decision that was made here in Hebrews chapter 11 at verse 4 that changed the complexion of how things was when God gives a command and God gives instructions. He expects us to make decisions upon His instructions. And so let's look at this passage here and give some merit to it. In Hebrews 11 and verse 4, we're going to start up front with Alan this morning on our left side, and then we'll just kind of move around the room.
By faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gift. And by it he being dead yet speaketh.
Okay, I think most of us recognize Cain and Abel from the standpoint of what happened in the very beginning. Now, Alan just read here where Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous. Now, the requirement for God in the sacrifice made was that it wasn't secondary. You know, he was going to give God everything he had. He was going to give God the best that he had. And so we know that he made a decision. And that decision, you know, a lot of times we have a decision to make of how we look at things, and how, you know, each and every Lord's Day we have a decision of what we're going to do as far as our giving, what we're going to do as far as our attendance, our worship, what we're going to do as far as trying to go to heaven. We have decisions every day to make. But notice, if you will, that Abel, he offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice, and this, he says, by which he obtained witness that he was a righteous man. Now, this was a decision he had to make. He could have very easily said, you all remember what they offered. Everybody remember what they offered? Anybody remember what Abel offered? The very best of everything he had. And, you know, it could have very easily been like a lot of people today. You know, I'm going to think about me first, and then I'm going to think about everybody else next. And, you know, a lot of times when we're looking at making decisions, we have the selfish attitude of not thinking, not using that knowledge that Abel used. He says, look, this is God. He blessed me. I'm going to give the best I can. You know, I'm going to make the best decision I can make. And so a lot of times we have a lot to weigh in our decisions. Now, let's look at Hebrews 11, verse 5. Now, this goes right down to where, just below where Alan started. We'll go to our right-hand side. Bruce, we'll start with you over here in Hebrews 11, 5. We'll go ahead and give 6, too. This is pretty good reading.
By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony that he pleased God. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.
Okay. What do you suppose really actually saved Enoch from the standpoint here? It says by faith Enoch was translated. And we know Enoch was one of the few in the Bible that didn't experience the physical death of what most of us will experience. All of us, in fact, will experience from one time or another, sometime or another. But by faith Enoch offered. You know, by faith Enoch was translated. Now, I think that's a decision that a lot of times people, they need to think about. You know, where is God in our lives? Are we prioritizing God in the way that we should? Are we making sacrifices each and every day to serve God in the way that we ought to? In this situation, Enoch was translated. He did not see death because of the fact that he believed with all of his heart in doing and making the right decision. And you'll notice there he says, without faith it's impossible to please God. And so, how strong is our faith in our decision making? I see people from time to time, and I talk to them about how we missed them and how we wish that, they had been with us or something like that. And, when we find ourselves in a situation where, and people say, well, you're meddling now. Not really. But when you think about this, willful neglect of the assembly is a sin. Did y'all know that? I mean, you know what willful neglect of the assembly is? Anybody got any ideas about that? Okay. That means we make a decision and we decide whether or not we're going to serve God and worship God as best we can. Now, there are going to be times when it won't be. You may have to make a decision. If you're too sick to come, I understand, and God understands. If you're got a situation where you just can't make it, and God understands that. God is an understandable God. But from the standpoint of willful neglect, that's something that a lot of times, people say, well, you shouldn't talk about that. That's mean, and you get people flustered when you talk about that. But that's not. I mean, what if I decided today I just got up and I didn't feel good, and a lot of times I don't. But what if I said, well, they can get somebody else. I mean, and I just lay up, I wonder how God deals with that. I don't have to worry about how God deals with it because I know how He deals with it. We're going to look at some of those things in just a moment here. Let's look at Hebrews 11, verse 7. This is another one. We're staying right here in Hebrews 11 for just a few minutes. We're talking about decisions. Abel made a good decision, and we know that Enoch, he must have undoubtedly made some good decisions. Now let's look at Hebrews 11, verse 7. Terry, you want to pick that one up for us?
By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith.
Okay. I want you to think in terms of this. Now, here's Noah. It's never rained before. And as far as we know, there's never been any rain on the earth. Here's God talking to this man. You build this boat. You build this ark. And He tells him how to do it. Can you just imagine what Noah's got to be thinking? Well, it ain't never rained. What in the world am I going to build an ark for? And then, for some reason or another, we read here that by faith, Noah being warned of God of things not yet seen. As far as we know, it never rained before. As far as we know, everything was moving right along, and then all at once God disrupts everything. And He says, look, I want you to build this ark. And in this ark, I'm going to put these animals. And in this ark, I'm going to let you take your family. And I'm going to cause it to rain, and I'm going to flood the earth. Well, Noah had some thinking to do. And he could have said, very easily said, like a lot of people, today's not the day God's going to end the world. There's a lot of people, what the Bible says about the end of the world. Does anybody know what it says? Not even Jesus Christ knows when God's going to end it all. But only God Himself. Not even the angels in heaven. Today we decide, hey, it's not going to be today. Yeah, I don't know when it's going to be. It may be 1,000 years from now. It may be millions of years from now. It may be light years away. But could it be today before 3 o'clock? And so what kind of decision, this is where Noah was with it. He'd never seen it rain before. But the Bible says here, and I thought about this a lot of times, he was warned of God of things not yet seen. Can y'all think of anything that we have not yet seen that we've been warned of God about? Can anybody think of anything? The end of the world we've been warned about. We've been warned about more people being lost than's going to be saved. We've been warned about willful neglect. We've been warned about sin and what God does with sin. And you know, those are all warnings that come from God. Now, whether we heed those warnings or not, that's a decision we have to make, you know. A lot of times, you know, things become prioritized in our life that's not where it needs to be. You know, people, they just don't see the necessity of attending services on Sunday night or Wednesday night. I know I go on Sunday now, preacher, but now I just don't see the need there. You see, it's decisions that people make. And some of these times in life, those decisions we make may very well cost us. You know, I've known people before that lost their life because of a decision they made. You know, I preached a young man's funeral just not too long ago who made a decision to take a pill, not knowing what that pill would do to him, not knowing at all what that pill would do to him, 26 years old. But he took the pill. I preached his funeral. He made that decision, you know. It was a bad decision. And, you know, a lot of times we have decisions that we can make that might very well turn out to be a bad decision for us, you know. Let's look a little closer at some of the things here. Feel free to comment now. This is what Bible study's for.
Hey, Gary.
Yes, sir?
Oh, Noah, didn't it take him 120 years just to build that ark?
Took him over 100 years to do it.
He hung in there all that time he had to sing.
I know. He could have made a decision to quit sometime along the way, you know. Look here now, I've been working on this thing for all this time, and it ain't rained a drop. But, you know, he kept going. Yeah. It's so important for us to recognize the fact that decisions, you know, that we make in life can very easily be the wrong ones. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 8. We're going to stay in Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 8. Brother Bragg, would you mind to read that for us?
By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out to a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed it. He went out, not knowing whither he went.
Okay. You know, God had told him to leave. And here he is. He has to pull up stake, and he has to go. He has no idea where he's going. He has no idea what he's going to get into and what's going to be out there when he gets there. But what kind of decision did he make? God says, you pick it up, Abraham, put it together, and you leave. Now, he could have very easily said, well, God, you know, I've got roots here. You know, this is where my family is, and this is where everything is, and I just don't see the need, you know. And he could have very easily stayed there. Guess what would have happened to him? He would have died just like all the rest of them. You know, we're talking about an evil place, and God said, you pick it up, you leave. He didn't know what was going to happen. He had no idea. But by faith, Abraham, when he was called to go to a place that he didn't know anything about, he made a decision to obey God. Now, my point in teaching the class this morning is all these people made decisions based upon obeying God. And that's what they did. And I think in our society today, wouldn't it be wonderful if today our government, which is the rankest, most corrupt of all it's ever been, wouldn't it be wonderful if they decided today, we're going to do what God said do about life and about society? Wouldn't it be wonderful if people would do that? You know, they made a decision, these people did. Let's look a little closer. Joseph, you know, he had a decision to make. For Joseph in Genesis 39 and 9. There's a decision here. Pam, you want to read up front? This is Genesis 39 and 9. And I want you to think about this.
There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee. Because thou art his wife, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?
You remember what Potiphar's wife was trying to get Joseph to do? Everybody remember that? has been placed into a high position of authority. And Potiphar's wife, she probably was kind of, she may have been a beautiful woman. And she was doing her best to entice Joseph into an adulterous situation. Very, 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 hard to deal with as far as a human being is concerned. Very difficult. It's a natural thing that God gave men and women for the attraction to one another. And here we have Potiphar's wife, and she's doing everything humanly possible. And you can imagine what this might have represented as far as the decision he had to make. Probably a beautiful woman, probably somebody that was easy on the eyes. And there she was, and she's offering everything she has as a female to him. And what does he do? He thinks about it, and he makes a decision. And this is what the Bible, and I like how his thinking is. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So he makes a decision, I can't do it. Now we know it got him in a bind. It got him in a real situation here. But he made the decision. How can I do this great wickedness? Now, I want you to think about sometimes in our lives, things that come up in our lives that we have choices to make. And sometimes those choices are very difficult choices to make. Prioritizing what's right versus prioritizing what's wrong. And there's not many of us in this room that can't say from time to time we haven't made the wrong decision. I know I don't want anybody to raise your hand, but I'll raise mine. I've made some bad decisions in times past by making the wrong decision. And sometimes we can't really and truly look at those decisions in the way that Joseph did. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we used that philosophy in our lives? And we said, look, this is great and wonderful, but this is something I can't do. Any thoughts or comments? Y'all all look at me like, I can't believe he's talking about this. But really and truly, this is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to Christian living. It's where we ourselves, we have to make decisions each and every day. When you choose somebody to marry, that's a decision. So, can I make this decision? Can this be the right decision? This is supposed to be a lifetime proposition here. Can I make this decision? Of course, we know there's avenues of escape in a bad marriage. We know all about what the Bible teaches about that. There's a way out. But the decision in the beginning is a very, very difficult decision. It needs to be something we give consideration to. Let's go ahead and talk about Moses. We make our decisions based upon human thought. But, if we did utilize God in the way that we should as a Christian, and, I'm thankful that I married the way I did. If I'd have married another way, I probably wouldn't have been where I'm at today. But making those decisions, using God as your priority to make those decisions with, like Bobby's talking about, a lot of times we use a lot of other reasons to make decisions, a lot of the human side of us. But if we would use God to make that decision, wouldn't life be so much better? I think He protects us when we make God the priority in our lives. Well, let's look at Moses. I think old Moses. In Hebrews chapter 11, this is verse number 24. This is going to be verse 24, 25, and 26. This is a pretty long reading. And Michelle, we'll be looking at you on this one. This will be 24, 25, and 26. Hebrews chapter 11. The recompense and reward. Okay, now let's think about Moses. Here we have a man who has a decision to make. He's been raised by the Pharaoh's daughter. You can imagine the wealth of the Pharaoh's daughter. She had everything that she needed to raise this child with everything that she could possibly give him. And Moses had a decision as he grew up, and we know that decision. And this is what the Bible teaches about using God as priority in our decision making. Moses looked at the thing and he says, look, I'm a Hebrew, you know. He looks at his lineage. He looks at God. And he thinks about, now you can imagine what this would be like. It'd be like going from riches to poverty, from having everything at your fingertips to going to a place where you don't have anything. And he looks at this, and the Bible says he's choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. That's an unbelievable choice to make. And you know, sometimes people make choices and it costs them. It costs them great. It costs them a lot of things. You know, people, one man that I tried to counsel one time, he went to prison. He stole a lot of money. And he said to me, he said, I thought about it, and I thought about what I could do with all that money. He said, and I felt like I surely could. He said, I knew all the ins and outs, and I know I could get away with it. He said, I just knew I could. But he didn't. He got caught. And in time, he went to trial, and in time, he went to prison. And I said to him one time, I said, you know, I think about this. I said, you know, that wasn't yours to start with. He said, no, it wasn't mine. But he said, they didn't need it. You know, that was his decision. They didn't need it. I said, did you need it? Well, not really, but I wanted it. And see, that's where a lot of times we make the wrong decision. We look at what's needed and what's wanted, and what's right and what's wrong. And how do we make our decisions? This is what Moses did. He chose to suffer affliction rather to enjoy the pleasures of sin. You know, he could have stayed the Pharaoh's daughter's, you know, son for the rest of his life. Had everything, but not the way it worked. Any thoughts or comments? Okay, now Exodus 24:3 has still got Moses in it, but he goes a little further. This is Exodus 24:3, verses 3 and 7. And these, Aunt Burley, would you mind to get those two for me? Exodus 24:3 and 7. I'm just randomly picking people this morning now. So.
24:3 and 7.
Yes.
And Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has said will we do. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient.
Okay. Now, Moses is talking to the people. They have a decision to make. They can either obey God or not. And Moses convinces the people and talks to the people, entices the people with the words of the Lord and all of his judgments and what's going on. And the people make this decision. We're going to do what God said. We're going to do what God said. Then you turn around and you read verse 7. He goes ahead and he reads the book to them. And he tells them, this is what God said you need to do. And the Bible says, he read in the audience of the people. They said, the Lord has said this. We're going to do it. We're going to be obedient. You know, when I first started out preaching, trying to be a preacher, never have made the grade yet, but whenever I started out, you know, a man told me that was very experienced in it. He says, all you have to do is read that book and tell the people what that book says and tell them how important it is to obey those things that's in that book. You know, I thought, well, you know, maybe so, but everybody's not going to do all the things that's in that book. No, he said, a lot of people's not going to do it. He said, but the ones that do will be the ones that make the right decision, the right choice. He said, that's the ones that's going to, he said, that's why you have to teach the importance of straight is the gate, narrow is the way, and few there be that find it. That means there are going to be very few people that make the decision to do the things that's written in this book to go to heaven when this life is over. There are going to be a lot of people who never make that decision. He said, broad's the way that leads to destruction, and many, many go in thereat. There's going to be a lot more people lost that's going to be saved. And as I grow older, and as I see more and more of what's going on in our society, can y'all see the Bible playing out? Can you see all the sin that's in the world? I mean, why is it that people want to just go out and sell little girls into sex trafficking and kill people and shoot people and do all these heinous, horrible things? You know, they don't care about what God says. But the Bible says of such is the kingdom of heaven, little children, little girls, little boys, you know. And that's what it's going to take, you know, people doing the right thing. Okay, let's look at another thing. I want to get, before we quit, well, I can't. Time's up. I'm sorry. It's already 10:30. But anyway, thank you all for being here. There's several other verses we want to look at probably. I might do a two-part series on decision making and let us engage in that. Anybody want to do that? Okay, we might do a two-part series on decision making. Okay, we'll have just a few minutes to get the kids in and start our other part of our worship.